everyone, in this video we are going to start with the second chapter, business structure. In the first chapter we saw why businesses are important. In this chapter we will see how businesses can be classified into different categories and the kind of business structures that exist. Business activity can be classified into three main economic sectors. We have already visited these before in the first chapter, but we are going to go through them again. Now, as you may remember, there are three main economic sectors: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Starting with the primary sector, it includes firms that extract natural resources from the earth to provide raw materials that other businesses can use. Now, examples of primary sector businesses include farming, mining, and fishing. Moving on to the secondary sector, it involves all the firms that use the raw materials that were obtained from the primary sector to process them and manufacture them so that they can be converted into final and finished products. Examples of secondary sector businesses include car manufacturing, clothing production, and construction. Finally, the tertiary sector. It includes all the firms that provide services to other businesses and consumers. Examples of such businesses include hairdressers at your salon, food delivery, and banking services. Moving on to the next topic, which is importance of sectors. It is important to note that there can be changes in the importance of economic sectors as the economy changes, especially when it grows. And the relative importance of the sectors can be measured in one of the two ways. The first one being the employment levels. Now, what this means is that the country will see which sector is employing most of its population. For example, if the primary sector is employing most of the people from the country, then it will be considered as the most important sector. The second method is by measuring the output levels. This means that they will measure the amount of output or the quantity of products that are being produced by each of the sectors, and they will see which one is producing the highest amount, and hence that one will be considered as the most important sector. Coming to industrialization. Industrialization is when the importance of the primary sector in an economy declines and the importance of secondary sector becomes more. Now, what this means is that if you have an economy in which previously the primary sector was the most important sector, for example, if it was an agrarian economy, which means that probably most of the people were employed in the agricultural sector, or maybe the most amount of output was coming from that particular agricultural sector, the primary sector was the most important one. But now, as the economy progresses and grows, the secondary sector is becoming more important, which means there are more factories popping up and more manufacturing and processing businesses that are being set up. It is also important to note that the countries that are industrializing are also called developing countries. There are many advantages of industrialization. The first advantage is that the GDP increases. GDP is the level of output that is produced by the economy. And as the output increases, so do the standards of living. Next, it can also lead to higher exports. What this means is that if you have more secondary sector businesses in your economy, it means they're producing more finished products, and hence your economy can now export more. Now, another advantage to this is that your balance of trade improves. Balance of trade is a concept that measures the amount of imports that an economy is importing to the amount of exports that it is exporting. Now, usually economies aim for there to be a balance between both of these, because of course you cannot have more imports than your exports, because that means you are spending more money in buying products than you are actually selling them. Hence, as an economy industrializes, it also means that the economy can now export more and improve their balance of trade. Next, it also helps in job creation. This is because as you have more factories and more manufacturing businesses popping up, it also means that there are jobs created because you need labor and you need manpower. So this also leads to increased employment, which is again a preferred outcome, because as you have more employment in your economy, it means that the poverty rates are reduced and many other social benefits are also achieved. Next, we also have the advantage that the larger, more profitable manufacturing and processing businesses can also make much higher profits, which means that they can also now pay much higher taxes to the government, which increases the tax revenue that the government gets. And this is a good thing because then the government can use that tax to spend on many more social welfare causes. And lastly, it also means that there is higher value added to the exports that the country is exporting. This means that if previously the economy was exporting raw materials, they had less added value. But now, because they are producing products that are from the secondary sector, more value has been added as they're now selling processed products, which is again an advantage. Now let's look at the disadvantages of industrialization. First is that it can cause rapid urbanization. Urbanization is when people from the rural areas move to cities, and this can happen because as you have more secondary sector businesses, for example factories, it also means that more jobs are created, and these job opportunities can attract people from the rural regions to come to the city. And this is a problem because it can cause housing shortages in the city areas, and it can cause overcrowding as well. Second, raw material imports might harm the balance of trade. What this means is that if your economy has started producing more manufactured goods, it means that it might need more raw materials than it is currently producing. And this can be possible because, as we have noted before, the importance of the primary sector has declined. So in order to get those raw materials, the economy might start importing those raw materials from other countries. And this might harm the balance of trade, which is the comparison between the imports and the exports, because now you are importing more raw materials from other countries. And it may be the case that the economy starts importing more than the final goods it is actually exporting. Next, it can also lead to multinational company expansion. Most of the secondary sector businesses can be multinational businesses. MNCs are businesses that have operations in multiple countries, and these are usually large businesses. So when you have such businesses in your country, it might harm the local small businesses because now they are facing competition from much larger businesses, and hence the local economy and the local businesses might be pushed out of the market. And finally, it can also lead to increased pollution. It is because as you have more factories cropping up in your country, it might be a chance that they're polluting more because you have chemical waste that they might dispose of in the rivers, the lakes. There might also be noise pollution from the sounds in the factories and air pollution from the smoke. So it can also harm the environment. Moving on to deindustrialization. Deindustrialization is when there is a decline in the secondary sector and there is an increase in the importance of tertiary sector. Now we saw that industrialization was when an economy moves from the primary sector to the secondary sector. And now in deindustrialization, the economy is moving from the secondary sector to the tertiary sector. Now countries that do this are also called developed countries. Let's look at the causes for why deindustrialization takes place. Now one of the main reasons is because of higher incomes. If the average income of people in an economy has increased, it means that they have much higher disposable income, which means that they can spend more on services, for example, holidays and tourism. Hence, the economy moves to the tertiary sector because more people are now buying the services. And the second reason is that there are increased imports from competitive, more efficient countries. What this means is that as many countries industrialize, it might be a possibility that other countries are producing products at a much more competitive and efficient rate. This can be because these other countries are taking advantage of cheaper labor, more raw resources, etc. Hence, an economy might start importing more of these products from other countries because they're cheaper, and hence the importance of the economy's own secondary sector declines and the economy moves on to much more expenditure on the tertiary sector. Another way in which businesses can be classified is by identifying if they're in the public sector or in the private sector. Public sector businesses are businesses that are owned and controlled by the government. Now let's see the type of products that a public sector business can produce. Most public sector businesses produce important goods and services like education, healthcare, and defense. It is because these services are too important for the economy. Hence, the government decides to step in and produce these goods and services. And they usually provide these at a lower cost or maybe even free of charge so that all consumers can benefit. These businesses can also provide services like energy, public transport, and telecommunications. Now, one of the main reasons why the government provides these services is because the cost of setting up such businesses is usually too high, and private entities might not have enough finance to do so. Hence, the government, with all its resources, will establish such businesses. Another reason why is because the government does not want the existence of monopolies. A monopoly is when there is only one business in the entire market that provides that particular good or service. Let's take an example of a country in which only one business provides electricity to everyone. Now, this is a very risky situation because there is nothing stopping this business from charging really high prices and exploiting customers, because customers do not have any other choice or any other business to buy from. Hence, in order to avoid this problem, governments usually decide to set up such businesses and provide these services, usually at a lower fee again, to customers so that the entire economy can benefit. And lastly, public sector businesses also provide public goods. Public goods are goods that are non-excludable and non-rivalrous in nature. Non-excludable means that you cannot exclude or exempt anyone from using that particular good or service. And non-rivalrous means that if one person has consumed that particular good or a service, it does not mean that there is lesser left for other people to use. Let me make it clear with an example, which is of a street lamp. Now, if you have a street lamp that is installed on a street and you thought that it would only be for one person, now that it is installed, there is nothing stopping other people who are walking on the street, driving on the street, from taking advantage of that lamp. And it is non-rivalrous because even if one person has benefited from the lamp, it does not mean that there is lesser light for other people. Hence, due to this nature, private sector businesses usually do not provide such goods because they cannot charge anyone for it. Even if one person pays for the street lamp, everyone else can benefit from it without paying. Hence, no profits can be made. This is why governments step in and provide these goods and services, because even though no profits can be made, they are still important for the economy. Other examples include lighthouses and roads. Moving on to private sector businesses. Private sector businesses are owned and controlled by individuals or groups of individuals. Some features of private sector businesses are that they're usually driven by profit maximization. Hence, they try to be as efficient as possible so that they can keep their prices low and also compete effectively in the market. And again, they're usually considered more competitive and efficient than public sector businesses because there is a lot of competition in the private sector. Hence, in order to stay ahead of the game, they try to be as efficient as possible. Moving on to the types of economies. There are three main types of economies that exist. The first one is a command economy. In such an economy, economic resources, aka the factors of production, are owned, controlled, and planned by the government and the government only. It means that the government decides what goods and services to produce, how much to produce, and when to produce. Next, we have the completely opposite of a command economy, which is a free market economy. In such an economy, factors of production are owned by individuals, and the decisions of how much to produce, what to produce, when to produce, all of these decisions are made by the supply and demand forces. It means that in the market, only those goods and services will be produced which are demanded by customers. And it is important to note that in reality, there is no 100% free market economy, because in all the economies, there is at least some level of government intervention so that the consumers can benefit. And finally, we have a mix of both of these, which is kind of like a middle, which is the mixed economy, in which resources are owned by the government and they can be owned by individuals or private entities as well. Most economies in today's world are mixed economies, which means that there is an existence of both private and public sectors. It means that there are both private-owned businesses and public-owned businesses. That is all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed and see you next time.